There's a moment he never saw coming. A moment he might have laughed off when his pride was still inflated. When he thought he had all the time in the world. He believed you'd always be there, waiting, checking, hoping. And maybe for a while you were. Until you weren't. The day he sees you, truly sees you, having moved on peacefully. Not with anger, not with vengeance, not trying to make him jealous, not seeking attention, but with an inner calm that doesn't need to be loud. That's the day something inside him shifts, because peace is loud in its own way. It doesn't scream like heartbreak. It doesn't beg like desperation. It doesn't whisper like confusion. It echoes. A quiet echo of a woman who has gone inward, risen from her wounds, and rebuilt herself without needing to announce it. You didn't move on with a parade. You moved on with dignity, and that, for a man who once had your heart, is deafening. And at first, he might brush it off. Convince himself you're just pretending, that your silence is a strategy, that you're still checking his stories, still hoping he texts. He might tell himself you're doing it to get a reaction. Because that's what many do. They post, they flaunt, they force a version of moving on that still revolves around being seen by him. But not you. You went still, not absent, not erased, but evolved. And the stillness, that haunts him. Because men don't always recognize peace as power, not until the woman they lost walks in it like a second skin. Suddenly, he remembers all the times he thought he had the upper hand, the times you reached out first, the texts you reread. The overthinking, the tears, the confusion when his actions didn't match his words. He thought that version of you was forever, but something inside you snapped, not in rage, not in bitterness, but in awakening. You realized you couldn't keep chasing clarity in a space built on chaos. You stopped seeking closure from someone who thrived in keeping doors half open, and you understood something that many women take years to learn, that the most powerful revenge is not success, not looking better, not dating someone hotter. The most powerful revenge is peace. Because peace is what people can't fake. It's what he never expected you to find without him. And here you are. You're glowing, not from a highlighter, but from healing. You're smiling, not for photos, but from freedom. You're thriving, not in rebellion, but in rebirth. You're no longer that girl who checked her phone at 2 and hoping to see his name. You're not rehearsing messages you'll never send. You're not stalking his feed, not asking mutual friends, not stuck in the narrative where your worth was tied to his attention. You rewrote the story. You found the ending you were looking for, not in him, but in you. And now, he watches, maybe not obviously, maybe not through likes or comments. Maybe he watches through silence, through curiosity, through that restless feeling when he hears your name, through those quiet nights when no one else distracts him. And what he feels is more than regret. It's absence. Not just of your presence, but your energy, your emotional investment, your soft check-ins, your care, your laughter, your availability. Because once a man realizes you're no longer emotionally available to him, even if you're still in the same city, even if he could technically text you, that's when he feels the real loss. Not when you blocked him, not when you posted someone new, not when you yelled, but when you stopped showing up in ways he thought were permanent. And that peaceful version of you, unreachable, unbothered, unshakable, that version doesn't leave space for confusion. Because now, he sees it wasn't an act. He sees it in your eyes in that one accidental encounter. He hears it in your voice, steady, kind, but distant. He feels it in your lack of expectation. That's the kind of realization that rattles a man, not immediately, but slowly, deeply, over time. Because he begins to realize that what he took for granted wasn't just your presence. It was your softness, your belief in him, your hope that he'd grow into the man you knew he could be. And when he finally matured, when he finally looked around and saw the weight of his choices, you weren't there, Thor. And that, more than anything, becomes the weight he carries. Not guilt. Guilt can be shaken. Not shame can be buried. But the weight of a missed opportunity with a woman who healed without him? That lasts. And here's the part that most people won't tell you. You didn't need him to feel that way. You didn't orchestrate it. You didn't play a game. You just moved on with your life. You went to therapy. You read the books, you sat in the pain, you broke your own patterns, and you didn't rush into distractions. You reclaimed your mornings. You found joy in small things again. You stopped performing healing and actually started living it. And slowly you became the version of yourself you were always meant to be, Before love made you shrink, before confusion dulled your glow, before waiting became your second language, you're not angry, you're not vengeful, you're not bitter, you're done, and that scares him more than anything. Because as long as you were angry, there was a connection. As long as you were reactive, there was a chance. As long as you were emotional, he still had real estate in your mind. But peace? Peace means he's no longer on the map. And this right here is where your power becomes untouchable. Because peaceful moving on isn't about pretending you're over it. It's not about jumping into another relationship. It's not about making him jealous. It's about no longer needing the wound to define you. It's about walking away from a chapter without needing to burn the book. And that requires something deeper than strength. It requires self-respect. The kind of self-respect that whispers, I deserve more than waiting. I deserve more than uncertainty. I deserve more than almost love. And you do. Because a man who truly loves you, who truly values you, who sees your worth, will never put you in a position where you have to question it. He will not play disappearing acts. He will not breadcrumb you. He will not keep you dangling between a maybe and a someday. He will show up, fully, clearly, consistently. But that man, if he ever shows up, needs to meet a version of you that's no longer looking for validation in someone else's emotional immaturity. He needs to meet a woman who moved on not because she was tired, but because she chose herself. And that's what you did. Not loudly. Not dramatically, but beautifully. And now he sees it in the way you carry yourself, in the silence between your words, in the grace you show even when you could be petty. And what he feels isn't just the loss of you, it's the absence of his own growth. The reflection of who he was when he had you. The man he could have been had he risen to meet your energy instead of pulling you down, to match his indecision. But now, the mirror's clear. You are gone, peacefully, entirely, irrevocably. And that, for a man who once thought he had time, is a reality harder than any goodbye. What eats at a man more than anything isn't always the breakup. It's not the fights, the text left on read, or the silence that followed. It's the image of you after. Not the girl who cried, not the one who begged for clarity, not the one who over-explained her worth, but the one who no longer feels the need to explain at all. The one who speaks with her absence, not her emotion, who answers with her peace, not her pain, and he can feel it. Even if you never say a word. There's a particular ache that comes with watching someone you once hurt begin to thrive without needing to be seen. When you disappear from his story but start glowing in your own, that's when the gravity of what he lost starts to pull at him. Or, you see, men often believe that moving on looks like revenge, like another man, like success blasted across social media. But peaceful moving on, that unnerves them in a different way. Because it doesn't come with a warning. It comes with wholeness, and that wholeness isn't performative, it's earned. He starts to rewind every memory, every missed call, every time he minimized your feelings, every joke that belittled your vulnerability. And what hits him the hardest is this. You weren't trying to control him. You were trying to connect. You weren't asking for too much. You were asking for consistency, safety, and emotional presence. Things a man gives freely when he actually values you. But he didn't. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't understand the cost of your energy. Now, every time he sees a post of yours, he sees the woman he always knew was there, but never took the time to nurture. He remembers your smile, but it's not the same anymore. It's freer now, lighter, and that's the part that messes with him. Because somewhere in the timeline, you stopped needing him to witness your healing. You stopped hoping he'd reach out. You stopped fantasizing about closure. You stopped replaying the relationship like a movie on loop. And when he sees that shift, it hits him that you're no longer orbiting his world. You're building your own universe, and he's not part of the constellation. And it doesn't matter how many women come and go after you, because none of them will carry the weight you did, not the burden, but the depth. You loved him in a way that saw his potential, even when he didn't live up to it. You believed in the man he could become, not just the man he was. And that kind of love, that doesn't come often. But here's the twist. He thought it was replaceable. He thought every woman would give him what you did. He thought you were the norm. And that's where he miscalculated. Yeah, because what he's learning often too late is that a peaceful woman is not a passive woman. She is not a placeholder. She is not a backup plan. She is a woman who gave her all, and when that wasn't enough, she gave it back to herself. So now, when he lies awake at night, after the party, after the noise, after the distractions, what keeps him up isn't the fear that you're with someone else. It's the reality that you no longer need him at all. That's a different kind of loss. That's not about missing a person. That's about missing a version of himself that only existed when he was loved by you. You see, a good woman doesn't just hold your hand, she holds a mirror. She reflects your strength, your softness, your capacity for growth. And when she's gone, that mirror shatters. And all he's left with are shards, pieces of what he could have been if he hadn't taken her love for granted. And that reflection haunts him more than the silence. Because it's not just you he lost, it's who he could have been with you. But you're no longer waiting for him to figure that out. You've transcended the place where his validation holds meaning. You've crossed the bridge into a life where your peace matters more than being chosen. And that's what changes everything. Because men expect you to be angry. They expect you to post cryptic messages, to throw shade, to chase them with indirect energy. That still keeps the dynamic alive. It still makes it about them. But when you go quiet, not from pain, but from elevation, they feel it in their bones. It's like a soul recognizing the space it once took up and realizing it's been evicted. No warning, no drama, just grace. And grace for a man who once had chaos is terrifying. Because now he sees the difference. He sees how he mistook drama for passion, inconsistency for chemistry, and control for power. But you moved on without needing to punish him. And that more than anything becomes the consequence. He will smile with others, laugh, move through life, but in the quiet moments when no one's around to distract him, he will remember the sound of your voice when you believed in him. The softness in your eyes before you turned cold, the way your touch made him feel safe before he confused safety with boredom. He will remember it all. And no matter how far he runs, no matter who he dates next, that memory won't fade. Because you didn't just leave, you ascended. You became untouchable, not in a prideful way, but in a sacred one. You outgrew the story. You outgrew the need to prove yourself. You outgrew the desire to be understood by someone who wasn't listening. You outgrew the narrative that your worth is determined by who stays. You redefined the ending, not as a loss, but as liberation. And here's the beautiful truth. Your peace wasn't for him to notice. It was for you to feel. The fact that it's haunting him now, that's just the byproduct of choosing yourself. He watches now, but he watches from a distance. A distance that he created with every ignored text, every broken promise, every moment he failed to see your light. And as time moves on, so will he. But he'll never look at another woman the same way. Because now he knows that real love, your kind of love, comes with a price. Not the price of being perfect, but the price of being present. And that's the one thing he couldn't give you when it mattered. Now, you're no longer a chapter. You're a lesson, a sacred, unrepeatable, life-altering lesson. And some men don't get a second chance at that. Not because you're unforgiving, not because you hold resentment, but because you finally loved yourself enough to never again make a home in someone who only gave you shelter in storms, but disappeared when the sun came out. You are the storm and the sun now, and he is left in the shadow of what could have been. Time has a way of revealing truth, not instantly, but inevitably. At first, he convinces himself he's fine. He leans on distractions, on the surface-level freedom he once romanticized. He thinks, I've got my space now, as if space was the prize and not the punishment. But slowly, the silence begins to settle in, not just around him, but within him. And that's when the truth begins to echo. He begins to notice things, how certain songs don't hit the same without you singing along. How empty his victories feel without your voice cheering in the background. How even the people he now surrounds himself with lack the emotional depth you brought into every conversation. He scrolls through his photos one night, not looking for anything in particular. And then he sees your face, that smile, that quiet warmth. Oh, the way you leaned into him like you trusted him, like you saw home in him. And for the first time, he doesn't see a memory. He sees a mistake. A moment in time where love met him face to face. And he blinked. You see, moving on peacefully doesn't just create distance. It creates contrast. It shows him what he lost, Not just in terms of you, but in terms of the man he could have been had he met you with the same depth, the same courage, the same emotional maturity, and that contrast stays with him. It follows him into every new conversation, every new relationship, every shallow attempt to recreate what was once deep and real. Because when a woman moves on in peace, she becomes a standard, and not every man is ready for that. You didn't just raise the bar, you became the bar. Now every woman after you is unconsciously compared to your grace, your composure, your heart, not because he wants to compare, but because he can't forget. He can't unfeel the way it felt to be fully seen by you. He can't unlearn the feeling of being loved without conditions, but with expectations that he kept failing to meet. He can't undo the knowledge that he was the one who let it slip. And here's the paradox. Sometimes it takes losing something real to recognize all the ways we weren't ready to hold it. But by the time we realize, the person we lost has already evolved beyond the version of herself that would have waited. That's you. You're no longer waiting. Not for his apology. Not for his change. Not for the day he finally understands what you were trying to say. You've outgrown the emotional limbo where women stay hoping for closure from the very people who gave them none. You gave yourself that closure, not in a dramatic "I'm done" speech, not in a burning bridge, but in a quiet, internal shift that said, I deserve more than this, and so you moved. Gently, powerfully, without resentment, without revenge. And now you stand in a space that few ever reach, a space where his feelings no longer dictate your peace. But what he feels now, it lingers. It shows up when he sees someone wear your perfume. It rises in his throat when someone laughs the way you used to. It echoes in his chest when someone asks him why things ended, and he can't find a lie that sounds noble enough to cover the truth. Because the truth is, he wasn't ready. Not for your depth, not for your love, not for the woman you were becoming, even while you were with him. He sees it now, of course. Hindsight is a cruel teacher. It gives the test first, the lesson after. And the test was you. You were the opportunity to rise, to mature, to step into emotional accountability. But instead, he clung to comfort, to ego, to the illusion of control. And now, he doesn't miss the relationship. He misses who he was when he had your belief wrapped around his name. The way your presence made him feel more capable. He didn't understand then that you weren't trying to change him. You were trying to remind him of who he could be without the fear, without the games, without the emotional hiding. But now you've stopped reminding. Because it's not your job to raise a man into his potential. It's not your role to keep proving your worth. And it's certainly not your calling to wait for someone to see your value when it's no longer up for debate. You are not a hidden gem. You are a mirror. And the man who truly sees you doesn't flinch. He reflects. But him, he flinched. And now he's left not with anger, not with a dramatic fallout, but with something far more haunting. Silence and realization. He realizes that peace wasn't the end, it was the beginning. Just not for him. It was the beginning of you reclaiming your time, rebuilding your boundaries, reconnecting with yourself in ways he never bothered to understand. And perhaps the hardest part for him is this. He can't even be mad at you because you didn't destroy anything. You didn't slander him. You didn't fight dirty. You didn't even shout. You just left emotionally, mentally, energetically, and then physically with peace. With power, and that's the legacy you leave behind. Not as the ex who caused chaos, but as the woman who caused transformation. Whether he steps into that transformation is no longer your concern, because peace doesn't wait for permission. Peace doesn't argue with the past. Peace walks forward, then never looks back. And you're already miles ahead. There comes a moment in every woman's life when she realizes she was never asking for too much. She was simply asking the wrong person. And when that realization lands, it doesn't just change her, it liberates her. What begins as heartbreak quietly transforms into a kind of power that is no longer rooted in needing to be loved, but in knowing she already is by herself. And once that switch flips, there's no going back. You begin to see everything differently. You look back on the relationship not with bitterness, but with clarity. You start to understand that love was never meant to feel like begging. It was never supposed to be this endless pursuit of being chosen, of earning a place in someone's life through suffering and sacrifice. And once you taste that kind of peace, the one that doesn't demand an audience, doesn't need to be posted, doesn't come with the noise of proving anything, You begin to guard it like your life depends on it. Because in many ways, it does. That peace becomes your compass. It becomes the filter through which every future interaction is measured. You're no longer impressed by potential. You're no longer drawn to people who speak well but act poorly. You no longer fall for breadcrumbs disguised as consistency. Why? Because you remember what it cost you to forget yourself. You remember the way your intuition whispered, then screamed, then finally went quiet under the weight of your own rationalization. You remember what it felt like to sit across from someone who claimed to love you, but made you feel like you had to shrink to be tolerated. You remember that version of yourself, the one who clung to hope when reality was begging you to let go. And now you honor her by never going back. That's the unspoken aftermath of peaceful detachment. It doesn't just impact him. It redefines you. You start choosing differently. You start responding slower. You stop needing to prove your worth through loyalty to people who are inconsistent. Because you've learned, loyalty to yourself is the foundation of everything, and he watches from afar. Maybe he doesn't say a word. Maybe he doesn't dare disturb the silence that now separates your worlds, but he feels it. The shift in your energy, the disappearance of the girl who used to wait for him to wake up. He may even try to return, not always with an apology. Sometimes with a hey stranger. Sometimes with nostalgia. Sometimes with silence that he hopes you'll break first. But you won't, because something inside you finally healed. Not overnight, not all at once, but piece by piece you stitched your self-worth back together, not with revenge, but with intention. And it shows in the way your laugh is no longer nervous, waiting to be validated, in the way your eyes scan a room without searching for familiar faces, in the way you love again, not recklessly, but consciously. That's what he'll never fully understand. He thought losing you meant losing access to your body, your presence, your routine. But what he really lost was access to the version of himself that only existed when he was loved by someone as rare as you. That version of him, the one who was growing, being challenged, held accountable, softened, strengthened, that version left when you did, and now he's left with himself, the real self, the one he kept hidden beneath ego and excuses, the one he never quite wanted to face. You were a mirror, remember? And mirrors don't lie. That's why peaceful detachment is so powerful, because it removes the drama. It removes the narrative where he gets to be the hero or the victim. It just is a clean, sharp ending that leaves no room for debate. And that silence, it speaks volumes. To the right man, it would have been a wake-up call. But to him, it's a lullaby of regret. And now, as you move forward, you begin to attract differently. Because you're no longer coming from a place of emptiness, of needing someone to fill a void. You've already filled it with presence, purpose, and peace. You've become magnetic, not because you're trying to be, but because there's no desperation left in your aura. Just calm certainty, just the quiet confidence of someone who knows their value. And men sense that. It's palpable. The wrong ones are intimidated, the right ones are intrigued, because true men, grown men, are drawn to peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from comfort, the kind that comes from emotional responsibility. That's who you are now. You're no longer chasing love, you're curating it. You're no longer accepting whoever chooses you, you're choosing who deserves access. And to the man you left behind, that change is devastating. Because he didn't just lose you, he lost access to the woman who would have built an empire with him. He lost access to the kind of love that elevates, not entertains. And the irony is, he might finally become the man you always hoped he'd be, but not for you, because you're already gone. Not out of bitterness, not out of punishment, but because staying would have meant betraying yourself. And you promised that version of you, the one who cried, who doubted, who begged for the bare minimum, that you'd never abandon her again. So now, when you walk into rooms, you carry her with you. Not the pain, not the scars, but the wisdom, the kind of wisdom that doesn't argue anymore. That doesn't chase, that doesn't settle, the kind that recognizes that peace isn't the absence of love, it's the presence of self. And when a woman moves on in peace, she doesn't just change the story, she becomes the lesson. A lesson that lingers, that teaches through absence, that whispers in his quiet moments and thunders in his regrets. He'll think of you in the stillness of the night. He'll remember how you used to look at him before your eyes changed. He'll wonder if anyone will ever see him that way again. And maybe someone will, but it won't be you. Because you're no longer looking back, you're already walking into the next chapter with grace, with power, and with the kind of self-respect that can't be shaken. Here's a sacred moment at the end of healing. Not when you stop feeling pain, but when you no longer feel the pull. Not the pull to explain, not the pull to be understood. Not the pull to prove your worth to someone who was never equipped to hold it. You just release, not in resentment, but in reverence for yourself, for the lessons, for the strength it took to get here. Because by now, you've seen it. Peace isn't passive. It's earned, it's fought for, and it comes with its own kind of weight. The weight of walking away from what almost had you convinced that pain was a form of love. But it wasn't, and deep down, you knew it. So when he sees you now, unapologetic, whole, radiant in your own rhythm, he feels something he can't quite articulate. It's not just loss. It's not just regret. It's recognition. Recognition of the fact that you were never asking him to complete you. You were inviting him to meet you. Halfway, in truth, in growth, in love without ego. And when he failed to do that, when he chose to stay small in the face of a love that required him to rise, you didn't shrink with him. You ascended. You chose the hard thing, the quiet exit, the graceful goodbye. And he knows, God, he knows, that takes a kind of strength he never fully understood until you were no longer within reach. Because he thought peace meant you'd forget. That your silence meant you had nothing left to say. But what he never understood is that silence is a language. And your silence now, it's fluent. It says, I have nothing to prove. It says, I made peace with the past, not because it was painless, but because I chose not to carry it. It says, I remember everything, and I still chose to walk away with grace. That realization haunts him more than any block number, any unanswered text, any stormy exit ever could. Because peaceful women are unforgettable. They don't leave destruction behind. They leave echoes. Echoes that sound like laughter in rooms he can't enter anymore. Echoes that feel like safety he can't recreate with anyone else. Echoes that remind him what home felt like before he lost the keys. And you? You're not trying to be a mystery. You're not performing closure. You're living it. You've stopped needing his apology to heal. You've stopped needing his presence to feel whole. Because real healing doesn't happen when he comes back. It happens when you do. When the version of you who dimmed her light to keep someone else comfortable finally steps forward and says, no more. That version of you is now your guide. She doesn't settle. She doesn't over-explain. She doesn't chase what must be forced. Instead, she aligns with peace, with purpose, with people who don't need to be convinced to choose her. That's what he's really feeling when he sees you've moved on peacefully. He's not just witnessing the end of something familiar. He's witnessing the arrival of the woman you were always meant to become. And that woman? She's magnetic. Not because she's trying to attract, but because she refuses to abandon herself. She's beautiful, not just in her appearance, but in her standards. She's powerful, not in her control over others, but in her control over herself. You see, when a woman moves on in peace, it sends a message to the universe. I am no longer available for half-loves, part-time connections, or people who confuse comfort with commitment. And the universe listens. It rearranges. It removes. It realigns. It sends people into your life who don't fear your depth, who don't run from your fire, who don't call your boundaries too much, but honor them like sacred ground. These people don't just say, I love you. They say, I see you, and they mean it. That's your future now. Not the past that couldn't hold you, not the man who didn't rise with you, not the storyline that made you the martyr for someone else's growth. You are no longer a character in his redemption arc. You are the author of your own peace. And if he ever reaches the level of awareness where he truly sees you, not through nostalgia, not through regret, but through truth, he'll know he didn't lose you because you stopped loving him. He lost you because you finally started loving yourself more. And that kind of love, it's non-negotiable. So let him feel whatever he feels. Let him carry that quiet ache. Let him sit in the space you once filled. Let him learn, not because you wished him harm, but because you wished him growth. And if he grows, truly, maybe he'll thank you in silence one day. Maybe he won't. But either way, you won't be waiting to find out. Because peace doesn't look back. Peace just keeps walking, head high, heart open, soul intact. And you've already moved on.